So the students must play the thirds and seventh to each chord with the backing track. The 5 chord only appears once, so they'll only have one chance to play that. That's in measure 9. So now we're going to, after we went to thirds and sevenths, we're going to review all 3 of these scales, just ascending, not descending, just ascending. And this is the first time we're having them improvise using the full scale. I'd like to hear them play the 3rd and 7th of each chord at least once when that chord appears. It'll be easy to do this with the B flat dominant 7th because that chord appears so many times. It won't be as easy with E flat or F because those 2 chords appear fewer times in the concert B flat 12-bar blues progression. Now we're starting with descending motion, so playing the 7ths and the 3rds, also in half notes. We're just going to do a little discussion about descending motion versus ascending motion. And the students will practice the Mixolydian scales that they wrote in ascending motion, but this time they will write them in descending motion, starting at the top and going down. So as a teacher, I would provide the students with the list of whole steps and half steps for descending Mixolydian scales so that that'll make it easier for them to write out the concert B flat, concert E flat, and concert F Mixolydian scales, starting at the top of the scale and going down. Students will play the 7ths and the 3rds in half notes because this represents descending motion. I'll discuss with them this week that descending motion and ascending motion are the 2 most distinguishable types of linear motion in jazz improvisation. Linear motion meaning motion going up by step, which visually looks like a line, I guess, in sheet music. So students will have a listening assessment, which I think that was one area that throughout this curriculum I underrepresented was listening, because that's a very important to jazz improvisation. But in this case, they will have a listening assessment where they will have to identify points during the recording of this transcription. Sonny Rollins' Tenor Madness, because that's what they're playing. That's the head that they're learning. They'll have to come up with examples of ascending motion and descending motion. And the YouTube link provided shows a visual of a transcription to Sonny Rollins' solo of Tenor Madness. So to keep it a little bit simpler, students are going to play these scales in quarter notes, starting at the top and going down, because they're not as familiar with playing scales or the Mixolydian scale in descending motion. For the concert F descending Mixolydian scale, because that only is worth 1 measure, and playing it in quarter notes wouldn't get them to the bottom of the scale, we'll just kind of cheat a little bit and have the F chord go into measure 10, which is typically a 4 chord in the 12-bar blues, but it would also work out as a 5 chord. So we'll do that so that students can finish all 3 descending scales in quarter notes. Oops. So in this week, we're just going to get them to play the Mixolydian scale, starting at the top and going down a little bit faster. So last week, they were assessed on playing the 3 descending scales in quarter notes at quarter note equals 120. This week, they'll gradually increase the tempo by 10 clicks each time they go through until we get up to 180. Once we get to 180, we're going to drop it down to 90, but have them play the descending Mixolydian scales in 8th notes so that each Mixolydian scale lasts exactly 1 measure. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. I don't know if I'm singing the right pitches, but you get what I'm saying. So we're going to discuss that 8th notes really are the driving force behind jazz improvisation, and that's why we're going to play most of our studies in 8th notes, because if you listen to any of the jazz giants, Coltrane, Parker, Miles Davis, any of those people, the foundation of their improvisational ideas are 8th notes, 8th note patterns. So they'll be assessed on their ability to play the the descending Mixolydian scales in eighth notes at 90 beats per minute, as opposed to in quarter notes at 180. So this is where things get a little tricky. We're going to combine ascending and descending motion. So for this, each odd-numbered measure in the 12-bar blues will be an ascending Mixolydian scale. Each even-numbered measure will be a descending Mixolydian scale. This will be in eighth notes, and because this is trickier, we're going to slow it down to 60 beats per minute. So 30 clicks slower than the last week, which was only descending. So because this is a really complex thing, this is going to be the main focus for this week 13 as well as week 12. So this time it's going to be actually the opposite of the previous week, where all the odd numbered measures were ascending and the even numbered measures were descending. So this time measure 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11 will all start at the top of the scale and go down. And the even-numbered measures will do the opposite. And the reason for that is just to really reinforce to students all the many, many options for jazz improvisation, even using such a short chord progression like the 12-bar blues. So the two main types of motion found in jazz improvisation are linear motion or stepwise motion and arpeggiated motion. So now that the students have a pretty good idea of all three of the Mixolydian scales found in the concert B-flat 12-bar blues, they're going to play arpeggios now. So 1, 3, 5, 7, and 8s. It's just going to be ascending motion for now. Students will be assessing their ability to identify the pitches that make up the concert B-flat, E-flat, and F arpeggios. So students will be provided with a list of the pitches, and they will be assessed on their ability to identify the notes that make up 1, 3, 5, 7, and 8s. So now that they've identified the pitches, they're going to play them, starting at the bottom and going up. So each measure will have 1, 3, 5, 7, 8, 7, 5, 3. That'll make up one measure, so that'll be in eighth notes. Do da 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 do da 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 da, etc., etc. I won't sing too much. Once again, it's a complex activity, so we're going to make it a little bit shorter. So we're going to review the concept of arpeggios here, and similar to what we did with the linear motion, they're going to start doing it in descending motion. It'll probably be an easier transition in arpeggios than in linear motion, going from ascending to descending. And so in this case, they'll go ba ba da ba do ba da ba, or 8 7 5 3 1 3 5 7, and they'll be assessed on playing that. Also 60 beats per measure, and starting at the top and going down in eighth notes. 8 7 5 3 1 3 5 7. So this is getting towards the end of the first semester, so review of all concepts from the semester, and the students may democratically vote on which exercises from the semester they want to review, and then in these last 2 weeks the students can make up any two assessments that they're disappointed with their grade with to boost up their grade. And then happy holidays, and then we're back in January. And the next big concept is the blues scale.